The lukewarm coffee sloshed over the rim of my mug as I slammed my hand on the worn Formica tabletop. A dark stain bloomed outwards on the pale surface, mirroring the stain spreading within me. Outside, the relentless drizzle mirrored the gray ache in my chest, a feeling that had become as familiar as the chipped paint on my childhood bedroom walls, each flake a tiny, forgotten memory of innocence. "Another one," my father's voice boomed, a sound that always seemed to reverberate through the small kitchen, laced with that particular brand of disappointment he reserved just for me, a specific vintage of weary condemnation. "Another one of your little projects that's going nowhere. Just like all the others." He gestured vaguely with his own mug, the movement sharp and decisive, a stark contrast to the aimless wandering of my own endeavors. My mother, ever the silent accomplice in his pronouncements, offered a pained sigh from her armchair in the living room, the sound a soft counterpoint to his booming pronouncements, a gentle punctuation mark on his critique. It was a Tuesday, I think, or maybe a Wednesday. The days bled into each other, indistinguishable and monotonous, marked only by the steady drip of their disapproval, a constant, low-grade hum that permeated every corner of our shared existence, and the quiet hum of my own failing ambitions, a discordant melody to their tune. For years, my life had been a carefully orchestrated performance of not being enough. It was a role I inhabited with a practiced weariness, a constant internal negotiation with their expectations. Every report card, every grade that wasn't quite the zenith of achievement, every failed attempt at a traditional career path, a brief dalliance with law, a fleeting interest in marketing, every late night spent hunched over a laptop in the dim glow of my desk lamp, the world outside silenced and forgotten, instead of attending family gatherings, the obligatory appearances that always felt like wading through treacle, was met with the same weary shake of the head, the same hushed conversations. I wasn't privy to but could feel like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. They had a blueprint for my life, a perfectly sensible, predictable trajectory, a well-trodden path they had meticulously mapped out. Get good grades, go to a good college, get a good job, marry a good person. A solid foundation, a life built on rock, not sand. I, however, was a smudge on that pristine canvas, a wild card they never learned to read, a deviation from the expected pattern. The labels were subtle at first, almost imperceptible whispers in the background noise of their opinions, then increasingly blunt, etched into the fabric of our interactions. Disappointment. Waste of potential. But the one that stuck, the one that burrowed deep into my psyche and echoed in the hollow spaces of my self-worth, was disappointment daughter. It wasn't just a description. It was an identity they had meticulously crafted for me, a role I was expected to play out until the very end. My escape when it came wasn't grand or dramatic. There were no tearful goodbyes, no dramatic slams of doors. It was a quiet slipping away, a silent rebellion waged in the back rooms of my mind and the late hours of my apartment, the only sanctuary I truly possessed. I poured every ounce of my frustrated energy, every unmet expectation, into what they dismissed as a hobby, a pipe dream, a distraction from my supposed responsibilities. It was an agricultural technology startup, a niche even within a niche, a concept so far removed from their understanding of practical success that it might as well have been in another galaxy. We were developing sensors and AI-driven analytics to optimize crop yields for small to medium-scale farms, focusing on sustainability and resource efficiency, a mission that felt intrinsically important to me, a quiet revolution in the way we fed ourselves. To my parents, it was abstract nonsense, a whimsical pursuit. They understood spreadsheets and profit margins that could be explained in a single sentence, clear and concise. My work involved algorithms, soil composition, weather patterns, a foreign language they had no interest in learning, a complex tapestry they preferred to remain unexamined. The early days were a relentless grind. Ramen noodles were a staple, a culinary placeholder for ambition, sleep a luxury I rarely afforded myself. I pitched to investors who looked at me like I was peddling snake oil, their eyes scanning for the next quick win, not the slow, steady growth of a sustainable enterprise. I faced rejections that stung deeper than any family criticism, each no a confirmation of their underlying beliefs. There were moments of profound doubt, where the siren song of their judgment whispered in my ear, a persistent, insidious voice. See? They were right. You can't do this. But then, a flicker of progress, a successful test, a small grantee that felt like a lifeline, a passionate team member joining forces, their belief in the vision infectious, would reignite the ember of hope. It was a slow burn, a quiet defiance against the narrative they had so confidently written for me, A counterstory I was painstakingly crafting, word by word, innovation by innovation. My family, meanwhile, continued their predictable rhythm, a comforting if stifling routine. Christmas dinners were fraught with pointed questions about my real job, the unspoken implication hanging heavy in the air, and thinly veiled offers to connect me with their friends' kids who had sensible careers, an ongoing parade of perfect archetypes I could never quite embody. Birthdays were marked by perfunctory calls, the conversations brief and polite, and gifts that always felt slightly out of touch, as if they were acknowledging a child they barely knew, a stranger inhabiting a familiar name. I learned to deflect, to smile, to offer vague answers that artfully skirted the edges of their inquiries, a skill honed through years of practice. Inside, I was building. Brick by painstaking brick, I was constructing something that was undeniably mine, something they couldn't touch, couldn't diminish, something that was a testament to my own resilience. The turning point, the moment I knew I had to change the tenor of our interactions, wasn't a single event, a thunderclap of realization. It was a slow accumulation of slights, a lifetime of being overlooked, a constant feeling of being a shadow in their bright, ordered world. It was my grandmother's funeral, a somber occasion filled with grief and remembrance, where my uncle, oblivious to my presence standing a few feet away, leaned over and whispered to my father, his voice a low conspiratorial rumble, "Such a shame about Sarah. Such a bright girl, if only she'd applied herself." My father's resigned nod, a silent acknowledgement of his son's pronouncement, was the final crushing blow. It was then, standing beside the open grave, the scent of damp earth and wilting flowers thick in the air, that a cold resolve settled within me, a quiet hardening of my spirit. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore, about the vindication of their eventual acknowledgement. It was about reclaiming my own narrative, about showing them, not necessarily in words, but in the undeniable evidence of my existence, that their disappointment was in fact their own limited perspective, a reflection of their own inability to see beyond their preconceived notions. I stopped trying to seek their validation, the elusive approval I had chased for so long. I stopped explaining my work, the intricate details that they wouldn't grasp anyway. I stopped making excuses for my choices, for the path I was forging. I simply continued to build, to innovate, to push forward, my focus unwavering. I focused my energy on the people who believed in what I was doing, on the challenges of the work itself, and on the quiet satisfaction of creating something meaningful, something that had the potential to make a tangible difference. The company grew organically, steadily, a testament to the hard work and dedication of our small but fiercely loyal team. We secured partnerships, refined our technology, and began to see real-world impact on the farms we worked with, the tangible results a balm to my weary soul. The recognition, when it came, wasn't loud or flashy. It was the quiet hum of industry acknowledgement, the growing respect of peers who understood the complexities of our endeavor, the increasing demand for our solutions as more and more farms recognized the value of what we offered. Then came the acquisition. It wasn't a hostile takeover or a desperate fire sale, a last resort to salvage a failing venture. It was a carefully negotiated deal with a larger corporation that saw the immense value in what we had built, a testament to our innovation and our market position. The numbers were staggering, a figure that still felt surreal when I saw it in black and white, a stark reality against the backdrop of years of struggle. $8.5 million. For something they had dismissed as a childish fantasy, a hobby that would never amount to anything. The aftermath wasn't about grand pronouncements or dramatic announcements to my family. I had no desire to rub their noses in it, to seek a perverse satisfaction in their surprise. It was about the quiet dismantling of their long-held assumptions, the slow erosion of their ingrained beliefs. The news trickled out, as these things often do, through the intricate web of family gossip. A distant cousin mentioned it to my aunt, who then awkwardly brought it up with my mother, her voice laced with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The reaction wasn't immediate shock, no gasp of disbelief. It was a slow dawning, a hesitant questioning that rippled through their consciousness. My mother called first, her voice a hesitant tremor. In the receiver. Her voice, usually laced with worry or veiled criticism, was stilted, unsure, a stark contrast to her usual assured pronouncements. "Sarah? Is that true? About the company?" I kept my answer brief, direct, devoid of any emotion that might betray the years of suppressed frustration. "Yes, Mom. It's sold." My father's call came later that evening. The usual gruffness, the booming pronouncements, was absent, replaced by a strange, almost apologetic tone, a tone I had rarely, if ever, heard him use with me. Sarah, I heard remarkable news. Quite remarkable. He stumbled over the words, as if unsure how to articulate his surprise. Thank you, Dad, I replied, my voice even controlled. The real shift, however, wasn't in their words, but in their demeanor, in the subtle recalibration of their attitudes. The next time we were in the same room at my cousin's wedding, the air felt different, lighter, less charged with unspoken expectations. The usual probing questions about my real job and my future prospects were replaced by a hesitant curiosity, a genuine, if somewhat belated, interest. They didn't ask me to explain the intricate details of the technology, the algorithms and data points that had once seemed so impenetrable. Instead, they asked about the process, about the people involved, about the journey. My father, who had always treated my work with a dismissive nod, a polite but distant acknowledgement, actually listened. He asked about the challenges we had faced, about the future of agriculture, about the impact we were making. My mother, instead of sighing about my lack of a stable career or offering unsolicited advice, complimented my dress, a simple, genuine observation that felt more meaningful than any past attempt at praise. There was no apology, no grand mea culpa, no public admission of their misjudgment. Their disappointment hadn't magically evaporated, hadn't been erased by the influx of cash. But it was undeniably, irrevocably altered. It was now tinged with a different kind of emotion, a dawning realization of their own blindness, a quiet shame for their consistent underestimation, and perhaps buried deep beneath layers of ingrained habit, a sliver of pride they couldn't quite admit, couldn't articulate. They no longer saw a disappointment daughter. They saw someone who had, against their expectations, against the very fabric of their predictions, built something extraordinary, something of undeniable value. The labels they had so carefully affixed had lost their power, their sting. They were just words, inadequate and irrelevant in the face of what I had achieved, a testament to my own resilience and vision. The silence that now existed between us was no longer filled with their judgment, their pronouncements of inadequacy, but with the quiet hum of their revised understanding, a space where their past assessments had simply dissolved, replaced by a hesitant, burgeoning respect.